Good evening, everybody. I'll see if I can get it right tonight. I had all sorts of trouble. The first part of it was cut off completely and then it all went pixelated, and I asked some advice about it, and it was something to do with the Wi-Fi connection, I think. So I'm hoping that it goes better tonight. So what I wanted to do is make a series of short live videos to explain to you what magical change is, how it came about, and what I think it's capable of doing. So to start us off, I kind of have to give you the history of it, and the history of it was really quite magical. So I suppose it was about 6 or 7 years ago at the start of a September term, and a dad came to see me and said, I've come to see you in person because I want you to know that this has got nothing to do with Stagecoach, but my daughter doesn't want to come back. So I said to him, so what's all that about then? He said, well, it's part of a bigger picture of anxiety that she's showing. I said, which looks like what? So he described that she was clinging to her mum all the time, she wasn't eating, she didn't want to go to school, she was constantly looking anxious, and it had all culminated with her having to go to A&E with a full-blown panic attack. And this was very alarming to me. It would be alarming to me today, but in those few years ago, it wasn't quite as common to hear about stress and anxiety in children as it is now. And this little girl was only 9. So I'm trying to be helpful and flinging things in the air as suggestions. And one of the things I said was, I have this little conversation with my 4-year-olds who start at Stagecoach, who are worried about being left and maybe cry for a few weeks. And it had been something that I'd developed across a couple of years by watching little ones arrive, get upset, which never surprised me because we say to our children, don't leave me, don't talk to strangers, and then we leave them in a venue full of strangers and wonder why they're crying. But what I would then discover is that the child would realise that there was nothing to cry for, there was nothing scary happening. They'd be very excited at the end of the first class, very positive about coming back the next week. And when they came the next week, they'd cry again, and very often in exactly the same place as they'd cried before. So this had really come home to me when I watched a little girl this time arrive. She'd cried the first week. She looked really smiley when she arrived with Dad. He's kind of playing with her and chasing her up the corridor, and she's laughing and giggling. She gets outside the room where she's about to go into class, and she looks at the door and starts to cry instantly. And it started to play on my mind as to what was going on, because the teacher in me, because I'd been a teacher for a lot of years up to that point, began to think, oh, well, you know, this is a child manipulating a mum and a dad, and she knows which buttons to press. But the more I saw this happen, the more I realised that the crying and the worry and the anxiety were genuine. They were not crocodile tears, but that worry and that anxiety was just misplaced, because they did actually know that there was nothing scary there. So I'd started to develop different ways of getting little ones involved into their first class, and all sorts of methods I tried, and it kind of became a thing. And it involves stickers and a special sticker chart, and we seem to do very well at getting children over that first anxiety. So I suggested to Dad that I have this similar conversation with his daughter, and I said to him, it probably won't do any good for her, but it won't do her any harm because it's only positivity. And he said, well, we're desperate, so we'll try anything. And we arranged to meet the following week. Now, I'd had the little girl within Stagecoach at that point for about 2 years, I think. When I saw her, I was quite shocked. She was very hunched over. All her body language said how anxious she was. She wasn't giving me eye contact. She wasn't speaking. So as we sat down to have the conversation, it occurred to me that she was probably thinking, oh, I've been brought here and Trudy's going to chat to me and then she's going to drag me off into Stagecoach. So I thought that wasn't conducive to her listening to what I had to say. So I said to her, just before we start, darling, you've got to know that you're not allowed to come to Stagecoach this week. And I think that was the only time she looked at me. So I said, no, you've got to listen to what I say. If you'd like to come next week, that would be wonderful, but you're not allowed to this week. And at that point, I could kind of see all of that tension ease out of her muscles, and she relaxed. But she gave me nothing during the rest of the conversation that made me think that she'd either understood what I'd said or had taken on board anything I'd said. And in all honesty, I didn't expect to see the family again. So you can imagine my surprise when the next Saturday, Dad's in the entrance hall and he's spreading his arms out and saying, you know, shrugging. I said, what? And he just stepped out of the way, and there she was standing behind him, as nice as ninepence, big smile on her face. And I said, oh, how lovely to see you. And then thought, oh, if I make a fuss, that she might back off. It might give her a reason not to take part in what she was trying to do, which was be brave. So I watched her going to all of the classes as previously she'd always done. And during the course of that morning, she came up to me and said, I think this is going to be a 3-stick-a-week, Trudy. And I said, that's amazing, darling. I'm so proud of you. Well done. So I was thinking when I got home, I wonder what they said to her to get her in the car. How did they persuade her to come? And so I rang them up in the week, and Dad answered. And I said, so what did you say to her to get her to agree to come in the car with you? He said, nothing. I said, what? She decided herself she was coming? He said, yep. I said, oh, that's great. He said, actually, she's starting to stop doing some of the things that she was doing before. And I said, what stuff not to do with Stagecoach? He said, yep. So I said, oh, good. So obviously I was pleased with that, but didn't kind of think that it would have much more in the way of implications. The following Saturday, Dad arrives, and I'm writing something at the desk, I think. And he came across to me and he said, she's stopped doing all of it now. And every time I tell people this same story, I still get that kind of rock-like feeling in my stomach when I went, oh my God, what happened there? So why can she turn herself around in a fortnight like that? So really that was the start of my trying to find out what the dickens happened there, and which parts of that conversation we'd had the most impact, what the process was, why she was captivated enough by it to want to try it and to persist with it. So that was the start of something which has continued for the last 6 or 7 years, and I've put in a lot of time and a lot of research and a lot of effort into trying to find out what happened. And so in the next little chat that I'm going to do with you, I'm going to tell you what happened in the early stages after that. So I hope that you'll join with me in trying to get the word out there, because just to give you a little taster, I've worked with over 130 children now with a whole range of problems that they're facing and struggling with. And we've had a really good success rate of children turning themselves around and making life for themselves and their families much happier, and not going back over as time went by. So all of those things I think are important. So to help me to further this, if you would leave a question or a comment or anything, I'll have a look at those and I'll try and answer any queries that people leave me. If you could like the post, I'd be grateful. If you could share it, I'd be even more grateful. and I look forward to speaking to you again. I'll do the next one on Saturday evening. Thank you very much for listening.